Welcome to the channel where the strange, terrifying, and unexplained come to life after dark. Here we dive into true stories, urban legends, and eerie encounters that'll make you think twice before turning off the lights. If you love horror that lingers, hit subscribe and join me as we explore the shadows. Now let's dive into tonight's story. I need to start this by saying something up front. My sister and I have always been hyper-aware. Call it a survival instinct, maybe a side effect of growing up in a not-so-great neighborhood where you had to read the room, read people, and learn to walk away fast if something didn't feel right. Over the years, we've dodged our fair share of creepy encounters, drunks muttering at bus stops, someone following a little too close in a grocery store parking lot, that one guy who waited outside our job every day for a week until we finally had to call security. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't just a bad vibe or someone staring too long from across the street. This was something we couldn't explain. Something I'm not even sure we survived in the way people think of surviving. It started on a Sunday night. We'd just gotten back from a short weekend trip. Nothing big, just a little getaway to decompress, breathe, not think about work or our problems for a couple of days. We took the late train home, the one that arrives just after midnight. The platform was almost completely empty when we got there. And I remember thinking it felt wrong. Not just quiet, empty in that way that presses against your chest. Like the air itself is waiting you for something. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed, just slightly offbeat, casting this sickly yellowish glow over the concrete. My sister Clara nudged me and pointed. Our usual spot, a small table pushed up against the brick wall near the edge of the platform, was already occupied. Now here's the thing. We've been on this route dozens of times. We know the layout like the back of our hands. The table, it shouldn't have been where it was. To get it into that position, you'd have to move a longer bench bolted into the concrete. And that bench hadn't been moved. Nothing had. And no one else was on the platform when we arrived. The figure sitting there didn't move. Didn't even seem to breathe. I felt it immediately. My stomach tightening, that animal sense that something's off. Clara felt it too. We exchanged a glance, not saying a word, but we both knew. Something was very wrong. I leaned toward her, keeping my voice low. You saw that, right? She nodded, her eyes fixed on the figure. Yeah, I've been staring. It hasn't moved. Not once. It was hunched over, head lowered like it was staring at its lap. No phone, no bag, not even a coffee cup. Just sitting. The hoodie it wore was too dark, almost black, blending into the shadows. But here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. We couldn't see the face. The lighting hit every other surface clearly, every crack in the pavement, every loose bolt on the bench. But the figure's face stayed hidden. Not in shadow, just absent. Clara stood up suddenly. What are you doing? I hissed, grabbing at her arm. She shrugged me off. I need to see it from another angle. Stay here. She circled around slowly as if approaching a sleeping animal. I didn't move. I watched her, my heartbeat loud in my ears. She passed behind the figure, then turned to look at it from the side. Her face went pale. She came back quickly, kneeling beside me. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't think it has eyes. I blinked. What? There's just black, empty, like pits, like someone scooped them out. I stared at her. Clara's a lot of things. Brave, impulsive, too curious for her own good. But she's never been one to make up stories. If she said she saw that, I believed her. I turned to look again, and just like that, it was gone. Gone. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. We'd been watching the platform. No one passed us. No doors opened. No trains came. The bench was still bolted in place. The table was back where it had always been. Nothing should have been able to move like that, or vanish like that. We stood, shaken, trying to laugh it off, telling ourselves it had to be some weird trick of the light, a hallucination, anything that made sense. But deep down, we knew we were lying. The train pulled in about 5 minutes later. We boarded in silence, and that's when I felt it. That sick pull in your gut, that cold trickle of dread down your spine. I turned to Clara, who was already glancing down at the tracks. You feel that too, she asked? I nodded. It felt like someone was watching us, but not from the platform. Not from inside the train. From below, I looked down, and that's when I saw it. There was a shadow on the tracks, not cast by us, not cast by anything at all. It didn't move with the light. It didn't flicker or shift like shadows normally do. It was just there, dense, oily, like someone had spilled ink across the gravel and it refused to soak in. My mouth went dry. Clara grabbed my wrists tight. Don't look at it. Just don't. We backed away, slowly, carefully. The train doors shut behind us. The world lurched, and we left the station behind. But whatever we saw, it didn't stay there. That night, Clara and I did something we hadn't done in years. We shared a room. We didn't talk about it, didn't say out loud that we were scared or that we didn't want to sleep alone, but we both knew. It was instinct, like kids pulling the blanket over their heads because they know something's lurking just out of sight. I lay awake in the dark, listening to every creak and groan of the house. I knew them all, how the floorboards by the kitchen always popped twice when the fridge kicked on, how the wind sometimes knocked the loose shutter against the siding. But now every noise felt new, off, intentional. And then, sometime around 3 a.m., it started. A sound, humming, low, slow, barely audible, but it was there. Not the kind of hum people do when they're working on something. This one was sad, haunting. I sat up in bed instantly, heart pounding. Clara was already awake, her eyes wide open. Do you hear that? I nodded, holding my breath. It wasn't coming from inside the room. It was distant, but not that distant. Maybe from the hallway, or worse, inside the house, near the stairs. Then without warning, the hallway light flicked on. We both froze. Neither of us moved, not even a whisper. And then something passed by the door. A shadow, not a person, not shaped right. It moved wrong, like it wasn't walking. It was sliding. But here's the part that made my stomach drop through the floor. We live alone. No one else should have been in the house. We waited there, back pressed against the wall, the silence louder than any scream, until the sun finally came up. In the morning, we tried to laugh it off again, called it sleep paralysis, maybe even shared hallucinations, just something to fill the space between fear and reason. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. That afternoon, Clara found the photograph. She was going through some old boxes from our grandfather's belongings. We'd shoved them into a hall closet after he passed, never really looking inside. She called for me, her voice shaky. When I entered the living room, she was holding up a faded black and white photo with both hands like it was made of glass. Look, she whispered. Look at the woman next to him. I leaned in, and I stopped breathing, because there she was, the same figure from the platform. Same eyes, no, same pits where the eyes should have been, same dress, same eerily motionless posture. Only this photo was dated 1973. Scrawled in my grandfather's familiar handwriting on the back were the words, "Me and Eleanor, summer before the accident." I looked at Clara. Accident? She nodded. There was a newspaper clipping in the box. She died in a train accident that year. Her body was never found. Suddenly, everything, the vanishing, the shadow, the way she seemed drawn to the station, it all made a sick sort of sense. I didn't want to believe it, but part of me already had. Eleanor wasn't just a ghost. She was family, and she was angry. The next few nights only got worse. I started waking up to scratches on my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was Clara messing with me, maybe trying to prove a point or get even for a prank I forgot about. But every time I looked, she was asleep, deeply asleep, breathing steady. So I stayed up one night. I turned off the lights, crawled under the covers, and waited with my phone in hand. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the scratching began. Not frantic, not fast, slow, steady, like someone dragging a nail down the wood grain, one at a time. It made my skin crawl. I crept toward the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing but silence. And then, a whisper, a woman's voice, muffled but clear, just on the other side of the door. He never told you everything. I threw the door open. No one was there. But carved deep into the wood in long, deliberate strokes were 5 scratches. Clara and I decided we needed answers. We went up to the attic the next morning, dragging out the rest of our grandfather's boxes. Among the dust and spiderwebs, we found something we hadn't seen before. An old cigar box buried beneath a tarp and a folded army jacket. It was labeled in black ink, "Do not play at night." Of course we played it. Inside was a cassette tape. We found an old player and hit play. The voice on the tape was crackled, warped with age, but it sounded like our grandfather, only broken somehow, like he was repeating something he didn't want to say. Over and over he whispered, "She lives in silence. She feeds on secrets. Don't speak her name." The tape ended with a sound that had no business being on analog equipment, A sharp digital screech, like a scream fed through a broken speaker. That night, every mirror in our house cracked. The morning after the tape, our house felt different. Colder. Not temperature-wise, but in the bones, like the walls themselves had heard what we played and were holding their breath. Every mirror in the house had cracked overnight. Some shattered right through, jagged webs spreading across the glass like frostbite. Others had just one clean split, straight down the middle, but they all broke, every single one. Except mine. My bathroom mirror was intact. I should have been relieved I wasn't, because when I stepped in to brush my teeth, I saw her. Not behind me, not standing in the room, in the mirror. Eleanor. Her face was pale, almost gray-blue, her eyes impossibly wide, black pits that felt like they pulled at the air around them. She wore that same faded floral dress from the 70s. Her mouth was slightly open, and even in silence, it felt like she was saying something. I turned around instantly. Nothing. I whipped back to the mirror. Gone. But something else was there now. Written into the fogged-up glass, words I hadn't written, hadn't said aloud. Ask your sister what she saw. My breath caught. I didn't wipe it away. I didn't move. I just turned and ran straight to Clara's room. She was sitting on her bed, knees tucked up, staring blankly at the floor. I didn't even need to ask. She knew. I didn't want to tell you, she said softly. But I've seen her too. She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. In my dreams. She stands at the foot of my bed and whispers things I forget when I wake up. But last night I remembered one. She paused, then barely audible. She says she was never buried. That changed everything. We started looking into Eleanor, not just as a ghost or a family story, but as a person. A woman who had once lived, laughed, been loved, and then vanished. We dug through newspaper archives at the library, piecing together yellowed headlines and half-forgotten memories. Most of it was vague. Young woman killed in train accident, body not recovered. One article even suggested foul play. Another hinted at suicide. But then we found it. A town record from 1973 listing her as presumed dead, burial, not recorded. No funeral, no grave, just a memory someone tried to erase. And beside one old obituary, tucked in the corner, was a photo of her and someone else. Our grandfather, younger, smiling, his arm around Eleanor like he never wanted to let her go. We brought the article to our mom. At first, she tried to brush it off, said Eleanor was just someone he dated once, nothing serious. But when we showed her the tape, when she heard his voice saying, "Don't speak her name," she went quiet. Then she said something that still sends chills down my spine. He was supposed to marry her. What happened? I asked. I don't know. He never talked about it. But I remember when I was little, I found him crying once in the basement. He had a photo in his hand. Same woman. I asked who she was. He said, she paused. He said she never left. That night, Clara and I did something reckless. We went back to the train station, armed with candles, the stone we'd etched her name into, and a printed copy of the article. We stood by the tracks and waited. It was late, past 2 a.m., and the air felt too still, like the night itself was holding its breath. We lit the candles, placed the stone gently between the rails, and whispered her name. Eleanor Grace Mercer. The lights on the platform flickered. The wind rose. And for just a second, just long enough to doubt everything, we saw her. Standing between the rails. Her face was different, softer, less angry, still haunting but not malevolent. She looked at us, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt sorrow. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And then she vanished, carried off in the wind, leaving only silence behind. We stood there for a long time. Maybe we thought it was over. But it wasn't. The next few days were calm. Too calm. No whispers. No shadows. The mirrors stayed whole. We slept through the night. We even laughed again. But then, 1 week later, I woke to a single knock at the front door. I checked the time. 2:47 a.m. Clara and I raced to the security monitor. Nothing on camera. But the audio feed, it picked up something. A voice. Soft. Familiar. I never wanted to be forgotten. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Now, every night since then, I've left a candle on the windowsill. Just in case. Because I don't think she's done. I don't think this is about revenge anymore. I think this is about memory, and the dead don't want peace. They want to be remembered. A few nights after the knock at the door, I noticed something strange. Not paranormal. Not even unexplainable, really. Just odd. Clara had started talking in her sleep. At first, it was nothing I could make out. Just mumbling. But as the nights went on, the words became clearer. And it was always the same sentence. You weren't supposed to see her. Over and over. I tried recording it, played it back the next day. It didn't sound like Clara. It sounded older, hollow, almost like it came from inside the walls. That week, Clara called me from work. Her voice was shaking. She was here, she said. Who? You know who. She worked part-time at the local museum, an old building near the tracks that used to be a train depot. She was alone that day, just closing up. That's when she saw Eleanor. Not in a mirror, not in a reflection. In the hallway, standing right there behind the exhibit of the 1970s rail expansion. Clara had frozen. She didn't move, she whispered on the phone. Just stared at me. Then slowly, Eleanor had turned and pointed at the floor, right where the original conductor's office had once been. We went back together the next night. The museum director owed Clara a few favors and let us in after hours. We found it behind a locked panel, an old, dust-covered metal hatch. Underneath, a trapdoor, and under that, a crawl space, about 4 feet high. We had to crouch to move through it, our phone lights the only thing guiding us. The air was stale, the kind that hadn't moved in decades. That's when we found the box. Old, wooden, locked shut with rusted iron clasps. We brought it home, hearts racing the whole way. Inside, we found a journal, a leather-bound conductor's log dating back to 1972 and 1973. The entries started routine, train schedules, weather notes, passenger complaints. But then things changed. March 2nd, 1973. She was back today, just standing by the tunnel, told me she's not scared anymore. Asked if I believed in ghosts. I said no. She smiled. April 10th, 1973. Found her crying in the corner of the platform, said, he doesn't love me anymore. Said they're making him forget me. I don't know who she meant. June 6th, 1973. He told me to stop asking questions. Said she moved away, but I saw her last night. She was still in that same dress. She looked wrong, pale, like she hadn't slept in weeks. August 9th, 1973. I heard the scream. I was in the control room, but I know it was her. The light flickered and the train, it didn't stop. The last page was stained, the ink smudged by water or time. But one final line remained clear. She never left the tunnel. That night, I dreamt of the tunnel. In the dream, I was standing on the tracks, watching the mouth of the tunnel from a distance. It wasn't dark inside, it was black. Not like the absence of light, but like a thing in itself, a void. I saw her step out from it, Eleanor, but her face, it was peeling. Beneath it, something ancient, something wrong, something that had been wearing her face like a mask. She opened her mouth, and I woke up screaming. When I looked in the mirror, something was scratched into the glass. The tunnel remembers. We've decided to go there, to the tunnel, not because we're brave, not because we want answers, because we're scared this won't stop until we do. We've traced it on old maps. It's been sealed for decades, but we found a service route that still leads to the old maintenance entrance. We're going tomorrow night. We're bringing salt, candles, a voice recorder, and her name etched in stone again. Not to provoke her, but to remember her, because that's what she wants. Right? Right? The path to the tunnel wasn't easy. We had to hike through brush and broken fencing behind the old rail yard, where the maintenance route hadn't been touched in years. Everything was overgrown, forgotten. It was like nature itself was trying to erase the place. As we got closer, the air grew colder. Not like evening chill, like something was wrong with the temperature itself. Our flashlights dimmed as we stepped onto the gravel by the old service gate. Even though we had fresh batteries, they flickered like candles in the wind. The tunnel entrance stood about 30 yards ahead, massive, arched, almost like a mouth yawning open. Someone had tried to seal it with rusted sheet metal and concrete blocks, but part of it had collapsed. Just enough space for us to slip through, and just enough for something else to slip out. Inside, the darkness was thick. Even our strongest flashlight could only cut a few feet ahead. The walls were slick with moisture, and the echo of every step sounded like it came from behind us instead of in front. We laid the stone down at the entrance. Her name, Eleanor Grace Mercer, carved into smooth marble. We lit a circle of small white candles around it and said her name out loud, just once. And then we went in. About 50 feet in, we found the scorch marks. Black streaks along the right side of the tunnel wall, as if something had burned there, not recently, but long ago. Clara ran her fingers along them and froze. I heard her voice, she said, just now, she said, "It's not the fire that took me." I stared at her. What does that mean? But Clara shook her head, already walking deeper in. That's when we found the screws. Hundreds of them, scattered along the tracks, old, corroded, twisted in unnatural ways. Some bent into spirals. Others snapped off like they'd been ripped out by something stronger than human hands. Further down, we hit the break in the tracks, and that's where we saw it. The old rail car, still partially intact, half covered in tarps and debris. It looked like it had been hidden there, buried in the tunnel and abandoned. There were scratch marks on the windows. On the outside, and one long handprint smeared across the glass, 4 fingers. No thumb. We didn't want to open the door, but we had to. Inside, it was worse than we imagined. Charred benches, melted plastic, blackened ceiling tiles. The car had caught fire at some point, but not completely, just enough to scar it. There were symbols etched into the metal walls, not graffiti, ritual markings, circles, runes, and her name. Again and again, Eleanor Grace Mercer. Eleanor, EGM. Some scratched in with fingernails, some carved with what looked like a screwdriver or knife. We found a pile of old clothing in the corner, and beneath it, a journal. Not from the conductor this time. This was Eleanor's. She had kept a diary. Clara and I sat on the cold floor of that cursed car and read the final entries by flashlight. May 1973. He said he couldn't marry me, said his family wouldn't allow it. But we were supposed to run away. We were supposed to leave all of this behind, he promised. June 1973. I went to the station. I waited for him, but he never came. They told me he left. They said I was crazy, but I know what I heard. I know what we planned. July 1973. There's something wrong with the tunnel. Sometimes I hear voices when no one else is there. A woman calling my name. A train whistle in the middle of the night, but no trains running. August 14, 1973. They're going to kill me. They know I've seen it. What they're hiding in the tunnel. What they did in the other town. I tried to tell the conductor. I tried to tell everyone. No one listens. The final page wasn't written in ink. It was scratched into the paper itself. He let them take me. We heard something behind us. At first, just a low hum, like a motor. Then a whistle. Not mechanical. Not from a real train. A sound that mimicked it. Mocked it. We stepped out of the car, lights trembling, and saw her. Eleanor. No longer just a shadow or reflection. She stood in the center of the tunnel, dress stained, hair floating as if underwater. And behind her, something else. A figure taller than the tunnel ceiling. No face. Just stretched skin pulled tight across bone. It loomed over her like a puppeteer. No eyes, no mouth. But somehow we knew it was watching. Clara screamed. The figure stepped forward, and so did Eleanor. He let them take me, she whispered again. Now I take what's owed. I don't remember what happened next. Only flashes. Running. Screaming. The tunnel pulsing like a living thing. Our candles blowing out. A hand grabbing mine. Clara's voice shouting my name. The journal bursting into flames behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the car and slammed the doors shut. That night, neither of us spoke. But the next morning, we found something on our front porch. The conductor's hat, folded neatly, and beneath it, a single word scratched into the wood. Remember. After we found the conductor's hat on the porch, everything in the house felt off. The air was heavier. The lights dimmed more often, even though the bulbs were brand new. And the mirrors, God, the mirrors, started fogging up in the middle of the day, like something was breathing from the other side. We didn't talk about the tunnel right away, not because we forgot, but because we couldn't. The memories felt stuck, like dried blood under the skin. Just touching them brought pain. But the journal's words haunted us. He let them take me. We had to know the truth. So we went to the one place we swore we'd never go again. Grandpa's cabin. It stood in the forest outside town, abandoned since his death, covered in ivy and silence. He'd lived there alone in his final years, refusing to come back to the city. Said it was safer. Said there were less reflections out there. At the time, we thought it was just dementia. Now, I'm not so sure. The lock was still rusted shut. We broke it with a rock. Inside, dust coated everything. But it was clear someone had been here recently. Fresh footprints, even though no one else had a key. We moved through the dark rooms slowly. The fireplace was filled with burned paper, but a few charred edges remained legible. I buried the truth under steel. Contract not fulfilled. She knows too much. And one line written over and over, again and again, until the ink carved into the page. I didn't know what it would become. In the bedroom, we found a trunk, old iron-bound, covered in chains and sealed with a padlock. On the top was carved a symbol, one we'd seen in the rail car, a circle with 3 jagged lines slashing through it. Clara and I looked at each other. We didn't say a word. She found the key in the closet, hanging from a nail behind a dusty photo of our grandfather and a woman we now knew wasn't our grandmother. It was Eleanor. They were young, laughing, holding hands at a train platform. We opened the trunk. Inside, we found an old conductor's uniform, bloodstained, a half-melted silver whistle, and a sealed letter yellowed with time addressed to my granddaughters, if she comes back. Clara read it out loud. Her voice trembled. If you're reading this, I've failed to stop it. I thought burying the rail car, burning the records, sealing the tunnel would end it. But it doesn't end. It waits. It listens. Eleanor was never supposed to be there that night. She followed me. I was going to end the road. I was going to walk away. But something else rode with us that night. Something from the other tracks. Something that wears human pain like a mask. It took her. It took others. I made a deal to keep you safe. That's why your parents never knew the full story. That's why I kept the mirrors covered. But if she's back, it means the deal is broken. It means she wants to finish what was started. She wants the truth spoken. And if you speak her name again, she'll never leave you alone. We sat in silence. The wind outside screamed through the trees like it was morning. And then we heard the whistle again. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Coming from the woods. We didn't run. Not this time. We grabbed the uniform, the whistle, and the letter. We took everything. Because we realized something. She wasn't the only one trapped. That creature in the tunnel. It wasn't just haunting Eleanor, it was feeding off her grief, her betrayal, her confusion. And through her, it found a path to us. But she wasn't evil. She was used. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted help. Back at home, we made a plan. If Eleanor needed release, if she needed someone to finally speak the truth for her, we would do it. But there would be a hunt. And we weren't sure we'd survive it. We set the mirrors up in a circle, 7 of them, from around the house. On each, we wrote a different phrase from the letter. She lives in silence. She feeds on secrets. Don't speak her name. He let them take her. The tunnel remembers. I never wanted to be forgotten. She wants the truth. We put the conductor's hat in the middle. And at exactly 2:47 a.m., the hour everything always begins, we blew out the candles. Clara held my hand, and I said her name. Out loud, Eleanor Grace Mercer. Every mirror shattered. All at once, glass flew in every direction. The walls shook. The air turned black. And then, we were no longer in our house. We stood on the platform, the one from 1973. The people around us wore old clothes, flared pants, long coats, vinyl bags. The sign above the ticket booth still read, Mercer Line, final route today. We were in her memory, and the train was coming. We stood frozen on the platform. People moved around us unaware, ghosts locked in a loop. Clara clutched my arm, her breath shaky. We're inside it. Her memory, this is the night she died. A whistle echoed in the distance. The train was coming, and deep down we knew if we were ever going to understand what happened to Eleanor, we'd have to ride it. The doors slid open with a mechanical groan. We stepped inside. The rail car was nearly empty. Velvet seats, brass railings, wood-paneled walls that looked too pristine for their age. Everything had a subtle flicker, like a memory struggling to stay intact. We walked the aisle slowly. Then we saw her, Eleanor. She sat near the back, alone, wearing the same pale dress from the photo, holding a bouquet of faded lilies. She didn't turn to us. She just stared out the window into darkness, lips slightly parted. Eleanor? I whispered. No response. I moved closer. We know who you are. We saw the photo. We found the letter. You don't have to be alone anymore. She turned slowly. And for the first time, we saw her eyes. Not pits of black like before, not empty, but full of grief, like someone trapped in mourning for 50 years with no one to hear her scream. She opened her mouth and the train lurched violently. Lights flickered. Seats distorted. The windows turned pitch black. And in the space between cars, something moved. Something wrong. Clara grabbed my hand. It's here, the thing that took her. We turned to run, but the aisle was gone, swallowed by darkness. Eleanor stood, bouquet falling from her hands. She looked at us, tears streaking her face, and whispered, "He promised I'd be safe." Then she pointed behind us. We turned and saw him, our grandfather, younger, wearing the conductor's uniform, standing at the entrance to the final car. He looked directly at Eleanor and stepped aside, letting the black shape slip past him. Toward her, it was like watching a memory fracture. Eleanor screamed, but there was no sound. The shadow wrapped around her like smoke. And then, she was gone, swallowed. The scene snapped. We were back in the rail car, but now it was rotting. Seats torn, blood on the floor, scratches in the walls. We ran. We pushed through the last door and found ourselves not in another car, but in a room of mirrors. Tall, endless, warped. Each one reflected a different version of us. Crying, bleeding, screaming. And in the very center, Her, Eleanor, floating inches above the floor, eyes closed, lips moving silently. As we sped forward, her mouth opened, and 1,000 voices spilled out, each one whispering truths that had been buried. He made a deal. She was never buried. The tunnel was a mouth. The mirror was a door. She remembers everything. Suddenly, Clara screamed. She was being dragged, something pulling her toward one of the mirrors. I grabbed her arm and pulled back, but the mirror's surface rippled like water and gripped her. Eleanor's eyes snapped open, and for the first time she spoke, really spoke. "You can set me free, but one of you has to take my place." The room went silent. Clara gasped, "No, no way, that's not fair." But I understood. She wasn't being cruel. She wasn't the monster. She was the lock on something far worse. And if we let her go without someone taking her place, the creature would be free. Forever. "I'll do it," I whispered. Clara turned to me, horrified. "No, don't you dare." But I was already walking toward the center. Eleanor reached for me, and then she paused. "You would do this for me? Even now?" I nodded. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Because you were silenced, and we're not letting it happen again." Suddenly she began to cry. The black smoke around her peeled away like burned paper, and the mirrors, every one of them shattered inward, as if sucked into themselves. Then, we were standing back in our living room. No blood, no broken glass, just silence, and Eleanor's voice, faint but calm, whispering, "Thank you." Clara and I collapsed on the floor, gasping. It was over, or at least we thought it was. But that night, something changed. There were no scratches, no whispers, no figures in the mirrors, just quiet. And for the first time in weeks, we both slept through the night. The next morning, I found something strange in my room. A train ticket, old, yellowed, stamped with the words, "Final route redeemed." And beneath that, in fading ink, "Passenger, Eleanor Grace Mercer. Escort, volunteered." For a while, things were normal. We didn't speak much about what happened. Not because we were trying to forget, but because the silence finally felt peaceful. Earned. We went back to our routines, work, life, grocery shopping, brushing our teeth without glancing at the mirror in fear. But something in me knew it wasn't over. Not really. I still had the ticket, and the word escort, printed underneath my name, felt less like a resolution and more like a contract. One night, about a week later, I was home alone. Clara had gone out for a late movie with friends, her way of trying to reclaim normalcy. I made tea, opened a book, sat by the window. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the candle on the sill went out, and I felt it again, that cold, watching presence. But it wasn't her. This was something older, hungrier. Then I heard the knock, not on the door, but from underneath the floorboards. A slow, deliberate tap, followed by another and another. Something was beneath our house. I grabbed my phone, texted Clara, "Come home now, bring salt." The tapping didn't stop. I grabbed the flashlight and went into the basement. The moment my feet hit the concrete, I could hear it breathing. Not loud, not growling, just present, like lungs made of wet stone inhaling in the dark. The light flickered. Then I saw it. Not a creature, not really. Just a shadow moving unnaturally, shifting, listening. Then a whisper, not from it, but from behind me. She was never the danger. She was the door. I spun around. There was no one there. But now I understood. We hadn't freed Eleanor. We'd freed what was sealed behind her. Clara burst into the basement, panting. "What is it?" I pointed to the crawlspace behind the boiler. "It's in there." She looked at me. "You still have the ticket?" I pulled it from my pocket. The ink had changed. Where it once had said "Passenger Eleanor Grace Mercer," now it read, "Next departure, pending. Escort, awaiting final secret." Clara whispered, "What does that mean?" I didn't want to answer, but I knew. We never asked why Eleanor was the key, or what secret she was forced to keep. And if this thing, this shadow, was now loose, the only way to stop it was to give it what it feeds on. A secret, a real one that mattered. So I made a decision. I walked to the center of the basement, closed my eyes, and whispered the one truth I'd never spoken. Not to Clara, not to anyone. I saw her die. I saw Grandpa let her go, and I didn't stop it. I was just a kid, no older than 8. I had been at the station too, hiding, watching. I saw Eleanor crying, begging. I saw Grandpa promise her safety. And then I saw him step aside. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I was too scared, too small. So I ran. I told myself it was a dream. But I remembered every detail. As soon as the words left my lips, the basement shook. The shadow howled, not like an animal, but like 1,000 whispers stitched into one scream. The ticket burned in my hand. Clara screamed my name, but I couldn't hear her anymore. The darkness wrapped around me like water. And then I was standing on the tracks, alone, but not empty. Eleanor was there. So was Grandpa. They weren't speaking, just watching. And the shadow was between us, still shifting, still incomplete, waiting. So I walked toward it. I didn't run. I didn't flinch. And as I stepped inside it, I understood. It didn't feed on evil. It fed on the unspoken. The lies we bury, the truths we never face, the guilt that rots in the quiet. And I had finally given it enough. The shadow dissolved. The tracks disappeared. And Eleanor smiled. When I woke up, I was back in the basement, lying on the concrete floor. Clara was holding me, crying. The air was clear. Still, she helped me upstairs. We didn't say anything that night. But the next morning, we burned the ticket. And for the first time since this began, we felt free. Epilogue, it's been almost a year now. No more knocks, no more mirrors, no more whispers. Clara moved into her own place a few months back. She says the silence is nice, real. As for me, I kept one thing. That small stone we etched Eleanor's name into. I keep it by the windowsill, next to a fresh candle. Not because I think she's still out there, but because I want to remember her as she really was. Not a ghost, not a monster, but a woman who held back a storm so the rest of us could live without it. And maybe someday, when the silence returns again, someone else will remember the story of Eleanor Grace Mercer. And they'll listen,